Number 5 on this list is that Bigfoot was a government experiment. The legend of Bigfoot has been circulating around the globe for quite some time now. Some of the earliest records of the creature are from the late 1800s when a British Columbian newspaper wrote about a gorilla type of creature that was wandering around the woods in the area. Since then, the rumors and the lore have exploded and reached an all-time high in the 70s. This was also around the time that the FBI got involved. The American government actually got involved with the investigations that were happening with Bigfoot in the 1970s. Peter Byron, who's a leading expert on Bigfoot, sent some unidentified hair to the FBI and told them that his group needed the government's help. They'd found the hairs and weren't sure what kind of animal it belonged to. They thought that this hair may be some of the first legitimate proof of a new species or potentially even Bigfoot. The crazy thing was that the FBI, they took it seriously. They snatched up the hairs and ran some tests on them, eventually concluding that they were actually the hairs of a deer. But the fact that the FBI, a super high-ranking government agency, took actual time and money to investigate these claims, well, it got people speculating that the government maybe had something to do with Bigfoot in the first place. The possibility of a government experiment that resulted in the creation of Bigfoot is a growing theory in the community. The government may have been performing some tests on animals, created Bigfoot, and then through some accident, Bigfoot got loose. I imagine that the government wouldn't want to own up to something like this because not only would it make them look highly inept to let a massive animal like this out on the loose, but there would also be a lot of moral questions being thrown at them from the public about genetic mutation like that. We've seen scientists in other countries before conduct genetic mutations like this, so it's not completely unrealistic to believe that this could have actually been the origin of Bigfoot. What makes this so scary though is that if this truly was the case, then what other creatures are the government engineering right now behind closed doors that we don't know about? Number 4 on this list is the Bigfoot species. What's scarier than just one Bigfoot? How about an entire colony of them? Bigfoot has often been depicted as a giant ape-like cryptid that stands anywhere from 6 to 15 feet tall. It stands on 2 legs, can emit a super high-pitched cry that can destroy someone's eardrums, and has a footstep that is roughly 24 inches in length. This massive size also contributes to the reports of its massive strength as well, with most people thinking that it's several times stronger than the strongest bear we have on the planet. All this being said, you certainly wouldn't want to run into this thing in the forest by yourself. The good news is that running into Bigfoot would be pretty hard to do because many people believe that there's only one Bigfoot. There are thousands of forests around the world, and the likelihood of running into the one singular Bigfoot, well, it's pretty slim. However, your odds increase dramatically if, well, there's actually a collection of these creatures. Assuming that Bigfoot wasn't a one-off government experiment, then it's pretty ridiculous for us to assume that there's only one of these creatures. Bigfoot would be a totally new species that we've never seen before, and to even get to this point of evolution, there would have needed to be more of them along the way. It should also be noted that there have been sightings of this beast in the forests of British Columbia and California, but then also a bunch of sightings in places like Maine and Ohio. Maine and Ohio are pretty far from British Columbia and California, and unless this singular Bigfoot is the most athletic creature on the planet, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that it would regularly be running back and forth between these two places. What's far more likely is that there are several Bigfoot families in these regions. That potentially there's 1 or 2 families of the species in the west and a few in the east as well. That would still fit into the narrative of sightings being very rare, but would make a lot more sense than the singular Sasquatch. Geez, try saying that 5 times fast, guys. Singular Sasquatch, it's tough. If this is the case though, then it means that Bigfoot is probably slowly growing in number. Without any natural predators, one would think that as the years go by, more Sasquatches will continue to pop up, which in turn drastically increases the chance that we do have an encounter with this thing in the forest one day.
Number 3. Off-roading in the company truck. Our next story features a group of blue-collar Berta boys who were driving one night and saw a Sasquatch and chose to respond in the most Burton way possible. I must warn you, this story is extremely Canadian. It was the winter of 1992, I was 19 at the time, and had been working the last year and a half doing seismic work all through Alberta, British Columbia, and southern Saskatchewan. We just got back to work from Christmas holidays, and we're not working between Valley View and Fox Creek. We were just driving into the staging area one morning. It was snowing like crazy, snowflakes the size of loonies. By the way, for our American audience who are unsure, a loony is this big. Anyways, I was driving the truck at the end of the caravan. It had been snowing so hard all night, and the snow had piled up on the spruce trees looking like walls along the tree lines. So, we were driving down a cut line to the staging area, and I had come out of the bush into a clearing. From the corner of my right eye, I seen a huge black object about 600 yards moving on the edge of the tree line and then drop out of sight. I instantly pushed my clutch and pointing to the trees, I tell the other 3 guys in my truck, watch! About 15 seconds later, a huge black Sasquatch stood up from below the snow line and walks 5 to 6 steps and drops down again. The 3 guys with me suddenly all yell out, "What the f?" And I throw my shift to first gear, cranking the wheels to the right, and hammered it. I was plodding through the deep snow and got about halfway when it stands up quickly, looking right at us, and launches itself into the thick spruce trees. You could clearly see its silhouette left behind as it knocked the snow from the trees. Just then, my radio goes off, and it's my operator flipping out, asking me what the hell I was doing out there with a new company truck. When we got back to him, he asked me again, so I told him what I had seen. He asked the 3 other guys, and they all said he seen something huge and black and drove over it. We're not sure what it was. Looked like a huge moose. That night in the hotel, the 3 of them come to my room and wanted to talk about it, and I told them to go away because the time to talk about it had passed and they almost got me fired for chasing a moose. They all got super apologetic and said to me, "You grow up your whole life thinking it's a story and a myth, and it's right there in front of you. Nobody's going to believe you." I replied that people would believe it a lot more if 4 guys say this is what we seen, not 1 saying this is what we seen and 3 others lying to themselves. An interesting story to be sure, and frankly, a typically Albertan response to seeing a mythical creature. Number 2, a hunter's encounter. Our next story is the first one where the subjects seem in any danger from the creature, so I imagine it was quite a terrifying experience. As the encounter was reported on albertasasquatch.com, witness was driving down a logging road, bear hunting with his wife and children at approximately 9:30 p.m. when they spotted what appeared to be the rear end of a bear entering the left-hand side of a cut line for a power line they were driving by. The witness exited the vehicle and walked down the cut line approximately 50 yards to where the animal had entered the bush line. When he arrived on the right-hand side of the cut line, poplar trees of 6 to 8 inch diameter began to shake violently. The witness described it as an explosion of movement in the bush next to him. Immediately, he saw 2 very large hands start to part the trees and bushes with fingers approximately just smaller than a Red Bull can in diameter and approximately the length of his entire hand. The witness was face to face with an animal they can only describe as a Sasquatch. Despite being uphill from where it was standing, the witness could see the forehead and nose well, however the mouth was obscured by bush. The witness described the head to be the width of a basketball, with golf ball size eyes, a large pronounced brow ridge, a large forehead with little hair, a flattened nose with nostrils the size of 2 thumbs side by side, and matted hair. The witness describes the eyes as having been dark brown in color with no whites. However, the area where the whites of the eyes would be had a purplish tinge of color. The witness also mentioned seeing eyelashes on the eyelids of the creature. The witness raised his rifle to the creature and it immediately retreated into the forest, 20 to 40 yards away from the witness. The witness's wife was flashing the lights of the truck, having seen the creature, although not well, from the side view where the truck was parked, signaling the witness to come back. The wife described the animal to be hunched over significantly, approximately an estimated 3 feet from its true height. Although she could not see it in detail, she said she could see its shape in the bush and could see it moving throughout the encounter. He began to make his way back. However, every second step he took, trees would shake just 15 yards into the line. The tree shaking followed him all the way back to the truck where he got in. They immediately heard a deep woo sound several times. They heard a bang on the truck roof and sped a short distance away, where they pulled over to see what had hit the truck. They found a large dinner plate sized clump of mud with grass in it, as if it had been torn from the ground that had been lobbed at the truck and landed on the roof. They left the area for the night. The witness returned to the site of the encounter and found what he described to be a possible handprint in the mud on the cut line and some suspicious impressions. Although they did not show any distinct detail, only a large elongated but wide set of impressions. He also found trees which had been stripped of branches to about 7 feet high, and the bark was peeled down towards the ground. The sap was described as fresh, coming from the damaged area. The area was generally disturbed with broken branches and some upturned ground. The witness is an experienced hunter and outdoorsman and said he had never believed in Sasquatch until this encounter. He hopes to see another Sasquatch in more detail in the future. If this hunter does eventually come face to face with another Sasquatch, I hope he will refrain from shooting it, as he is a rare species and therefore not covered by his hunting license. Number 1. My ski buddy Bigfoot. Our final tale involves a man engaging in winter sports and coming across another man out in nature who he greeted in typically polite Canadian fashion. As he related the encounter, was cross-country skiing and was trudging back to the parking lot at Ribbon Creek going south. I stopped in a clearing to rest a bit and check out the river, looking west. From the third tree up the hill on the other side of the clearing, I saw a big guy in a dark parka, who must have been snowshoeing, step out from behind the tree. I watched as he came down around the trees to the first row of trees beside the clearing. I watched as he crouched, reached out, and shook the first tree. Spruce tree, about 30 or so feet tall. After he shook the tree, he stepped back as the snow fell off of it. I was thinking, God, he's got big arms, must be a lineman. After the snow had fallen, he walked around the tree and into the clearing. I waved. He was about 85 to 90 yards away and started walking towards me. As he walked towards me, I began to realize that it isn't a big guy in a dark parka snowshoeing, and I think I went into shock. He walked up to about 18 to 20 yards away and stopped. We just stood there looking at each other for about 5 minutes. When the shock wore off, at that point, I was thinking, he's really big, and if he wants to get me, he can. So I waved and started south back towards Ribbon Creek. I went a little ways and turned back, and he was gone. I think he was just curious, not threatening at all. Just came out to have a look at me, I guess. Never did tell anyone, just thought you could add me to the list of, oh, I know they're out there. There's something comforting that a man could get so close to Bigfoot and have such a relatively calm and pleasant encounter with the creature. The only thing that would have made that story better would be if Bigfoot had waved back.
Number 5 on this list is the Wampus Cat. A name that sounds kind of silly and cute, but really isn't reflective of how dangerous this creature can truly be. How Stuff Works says, it smells awful, like skunk spray and wet dog. It has glowing yellow eyes and fangs. It kills animals, kidnaps kids, and terrifies all it meets. Creepiest of all, it's half cat, half woman. This terrifying creature is the Wampus Cat. Generally on the prowl in northeastern Tennessee, the creature has also been spotted in eastern Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, and intriguingly at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. The origin story of this kitty is still up in the air, but apparently there are 2 popular ones. One says a Cherokee wife hid beneath the skin of a mountain lion to spy on her husband and his buddies while they were hunting. They discovered her, and as punishment, the tribe's medicine men said she had to wear the lion skin forevermore, turning her into a catwoman. Anguished, she roams around bemoaning her fate. Another tale says a Cherokee warrior went on the hunt for a beast that was terrorizing his tribe. When he tracked it down, it looked him straight in the eye, causing the warrior to go insane. The warrior's wife wasn't happy about this, so she hid under the skin of a mountain lion and stalked the beast to exact revenge. When she found it, the beast took one look at her and fled, petrified. Cross your fingers that you don't ever run into this creature, because it may be the last thing that you ever do. Number 4 on this list is a poison dart frog. This animal is not something from legend. It's not a scary story that somebody told you by a campfire one evening that got exaggerated throughout the years. It is a very real, very dangerous animal that can be found in the Amazon rainforests. Poison dart frogs are incredibly poisonous. So poisonous, in fact, that it's believed the venom contained in one single tiny frog is enough to kill 10 adult human beings. It's really too bad that we can't get close to these creatures because they are truly stunning. Their bright colors are some of the most beautiful in the entire world, and the patterns on their back are marvelous to look at. In fact, these patterns resemble small darts, and this is one of the reasons why they got their name, poison dart frogs. The other reason why they got their name is because Native Americans used to take the poison from these animals and put it onto the tip of darts that they would then use to poison their enemies. If you were to get hit with one of these darts, you would die quickly, and the same rule applies to the frogs. The tiny creatures are only 1.5 to 6 centimeters big, which is actually a little bit scarier to me. The thing is that these little guys aren't aggressive in nature. If you're walking and spot one on the path, then you can simply just avoid it and it shouldn't attack you. However, because they are so tiny, it's very easy to accidentally touch one as you trek through the forest. Unlike scorpions or snakes where they need to break the skin, a poison dart frog's toxin just seeps into your skin, and therefore simply touching it is enough to kill you. You may not even know that you've encountered one, because if you do touch it, then you'll be dead in 3 minutes or less. If you are going to the Amazon, make sure you take a guide who knows what they're doing and maybe wear some gloves to be extra careful of the poison dart frog.
In our third spot today, we have the 911 call. Back in 1996, in Kitsap Peninsula in Washington State, the police received a very eerie call for help in the middle of the night. The call was made from a man who claims a strange tall beast was in his yard. The man starts off pretty calm on the phone, but when he realizes that what he is seeing might just be the Bigfoot, he becomes increasingly panicked. In fact, the call was saved and posted online, so I'll share some segments of it.
911, what are you reporting? With someone or something crawling around out here. Do you see what person or an animal or? I can't tell. All I know is my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man, or something that looks like a man. I don't know what it was, just that it ran across the yard.
So according to the man, he was alerted when the sensor light in his backyard came on and he could see what looked like a creature or a man. He couldn't tell. The man then goes on to explain that his dog was recently killed, which is why he's more on edge, because this creature could be the beast that killed his dog. Then the man starts to panic. He realizes just how big this thing is.
He's right. Is he in your yard, sir? Yeah, God, he's big. Okay, what's he in your yard? He's looking big. Oh, the guy is on foot. I don't know what, he's big, real big person, that's all I can say. Okay, it is a person. Yeah, it was a person, somebody real big.
When the police arrived, the beast had already left. So unfortunately, they didn't get to witness it themselves. But a week later, his neighbor also had a similar encounter. They described a big, tall man in all black or covered in black fur lurking in their backyard. Fortunately, this time the police managed to capture a photo of it, but they never released it to the public to see. Moving on to number 2 today, we have the Midnight Bigfoot Man. On April 24th, 2018, a 24-year-old woman who wanted her identity kept a secret had just left a 24-hour gym around midnight. She was headed to her car in the vacant parking lot when she heard a twig snap. She turned around and saw an 8-foot-tall creature covered in gray fur. When she looked at the beast, it turned around and ran right back into the woods. Now, she described this thing as being massive. Not only was it super tall, but she claims it was several hundreds of pounds. But despite its size, it moved very quickly. Shook, she immediately called her parents and they came to get her. Not long after, nationally acclaimed Bigfoot investigator Matthew Moneymaker got wind of her story. He interviewed the woman and then decided to investigate the area himself. From his investigation, he found a number of deer tracks in the area. So he believed that the Bigfoot was following a deer up the path, and when he saw the woman, he got scared and fled. He continued on saying, and I quote, "In Ashland, there are only 3 possibilities. Either the witness is lying, which I am sure she is not, or she saw someone in a Bigfoot costume, which makes no sense. Ordinarily, in a hoax, the person reporting the sighting or taking the photos is in on the scam. Or she saw a real Bigfoot, which I believe is the case here." After a while of doing these kinds of investigations, you get pretty good at knowing when someone is telling the truth. And he believes that this woman was genuinely telling the truth. He could see how shaken up she was, and she didn't want her name attached to the story, so it's not like she was seeking fame. So what did she have to gain here? Based on these facts and others, he believes that this woman is telling the truth and did encounter a real Bigfoot. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Russian Bigfoot. So the Bigfoot is said to mainly live in the wooded and remote areas in Canada and in some areas in the US. But this next encounter is in Russia. So this might just prove that there are Bigfoots living all over the world. And someone let me know, what's the plural of Bigfoot? Is it big feet? Is it Bigfoots? Let me know in the comments below. So back in 2016, a family was driving down a rural road when they caught sight of this weird black creature in the distance. The son in the backseat started recording it, and I guess Bigfoot didn't like that because it began to chase the car.
Он скрылся!
Unfortunately, I don't speak Russian, but someone did translate the video, and in that section we just saw, the mom is making sure that her son is recording. They believe that they finally lost the Bigfoot, so they slow down, only for it to emerge in the distance again.
Не подходи!
They drive off again and stop again further down the road to film the beast once more.
Он бежит! Лёша, кто закрыл? Он идет! бежит.
That damn thing is running through the fields pretty fast. A couple seconds later, the son decides to roll down his window to get a better shot of it. And that made the Bigfoot even more angry. Camera cuts off with the Bigfoot running directly towards them. According to the couple who made a report after this incident, the creature actually jumped onto their car and broke the glass. But obviously, they weren't recording when that happened. So, what did we learn from this? Number 1, don't mess with the Bigfoot. Number 2, the Bigfoot in Russia are super aggressive. And 3, always keep the camera rolling. Come on, guys. Starting off this countdown, we have Michael Greene. Michael Greene is a former US Army tank commander and fraud investigator who ended up encountering the Bigfoot. So back in the mid-2000s, Greene decided to camp out by himself one night in a forest in North Carolina. Like I said, this dude worked for the Army, so it would take an awful lot to scare him. But that night, he was thoroughly spooked. So he woke up to the sound of something approaching his tent. He then said, and I quote, 2 seconds later, it was right over my tent. He then said it let out a deafening roar that, and I quote, scared the devil out of me, as you can imagine. 2 nights later, he was camping in the same forest, but this time with some friends. That night, they actually saw the creature that scared Greene previously. Greene described it as a lumbering bipedal ape-like beast. He said, and I quote, it was about 7.5 or 8 feet tall and striding with that ponderous arm swing. He went on to say that the biggest mistake of his life was not recording the beast. From there, he set out on a mission to capture this beast on film. He returned to the same area week after week with cameras and night vision equipment and would just wait for it. In 2009, his patience finally paid off and he captured this creature on his night vision camera. Coming in at number 4, we have the cabin on the lake. This story was shared by a Reddit user on a post talking about real-life encounters with cryptids. According to him, his story takes place a couple of years ago when he was visiting his family's cabin. At this time, the cabin was in a pretty remote area. It wasn't until later on when it started to become more heavily developed. Anyways, one day they decided to go for a picnic in their usual spot. Their picnic spot was at the edge of a very steep hill. At the bottom of the hill was a field that would eventually merge with a large forest. So they were all sitting around and eating their food when they heard a really loud banging coming from the bottom of the hill. So his dad got up and went to investigate. When he did, he saw a massive creature standing on 2 feet, taking large logs and throwing them over his head. Logs were then hitting the tree trunks, which is what was making that loud noise. His mom went over to see and she witnessed this creature as well. So they all packed up and got out there as fast as possible. That's not all though. About 4 years ago, they were having Christmas with his aunt, who would also stay at a cabin in the same area. They were all sharing memories from up there, and that's when his aunt was all like, yo, I have the wildest story. She talked about the time she was picking berries to make jam. That's when she saw this weird creature in the distance. She thought it was a bear until it stood up on 2 legs and started walking into the woods. Not only that, but after hearing his aunt's story, he decided to do some research and found that there were tons of similar sightings in that area. So could it be that the Bigfoot lives by this dude's cottage?
Number 3, medicine hat. Next, we have a tale from a man who saw Bigfoot as a child without ever being aware what a Sasquatch even was until this encounter. However, this experience with the legendary creature left quite an impression on the man, who can still recall the event in great detail, even all these years later. As he put it, I first started reading about Sasquatches in 1972 after my first encounter. I was born in Calgary, and about once a month we would go to Banff, Kananaskis, or Bragg Creek to go camping. I got used to seeing bats and other wildlife at a young age. On the last weekend of August 1972, we went to Medicine Hat to visit friends. On Saturday the 26th, we went to have a picnic around 10:30 a.m. in Strathcona Park. We started a fire and then went down to the South Saskatchewan River to swim and play in the water. It was sunny and warm with no wind. At about 1 p.m., it was decided that we would make our way down the winding path to our campsite, which was about 150 yards away. Eager to get a hot dog on a stick, I ran ahead of everyone else. About 75 yards down the path, I was jogging when I suddenly smelled a strong odor. I stopped, and it smelled like a freshly washed dog that had rolled around in garbage for a week. I heard a light rustle to the right, and as I turned to look, I saw a large black and red furred back of something facing away from me to the west. I could hear the creak about 30 yards ahead of the creature I was looking at. Its butt was a couple inches off the ground. It was hunched forward at some Saskatoon bushes, and it had a cone-shaped head that seemed to be sitting on its shoulders. It was about 4 feet wide at the shoulders and about 5 feet high. It made no sound or movement, but when I thought to myself, what am I looking at? I was answered by a thought of, you don't see me, I'm not here. I wondered what I was looking at again, and again I got the same response. Suddenly it quietly muttered a chattering sound, and when I heard it, the thought of get out of here now entered my head. Without hesitation, I started running towards the campsite, and as I did, I could hear a heavy thump, thump, thump sound running towards the creek, and the sound of bushes being crunched. When everyone else got back, I asked if they had seen or heard it, which no one had. I was told it must be a bear, but I said it didn't look or act like any bear I ever saw. Then, a friend said I must have seen a Sasquatch, and everyone laughed. I asked, what is a Sasquatch, as I had never heard or seen the Patterson-Gimlin film. When they told me what it was, I said that it was probably what I saw, and everyone laughed again. I started to read and learn as much as I could about them. I forgot to mention that the Sasquatch was about 30 feet away, with an unobstructed view. Number 2. Pullman sighting. Alberta is one of the best places in Canada to go hunting, if that is an activity that you enjoy. There is a variety of wildlife and strict rules in place to ensure that none of the animals are over-hunted. However, you can't get tags to hunt a Sasquatch, which is probably for the best, as this hunter found out and he was making his way up a mountain and came face to face with an animal he wasn't expecting. This is his story. I was hunting 19 kilometers north of Coleman, Alberta. It was late afternoon, early evening. I moved up the mountain, following a game trail through some heavy brush, tracking some elk in the area, when I came upon what I thought was a very large black bear in the brush, about 30 feet ahead of me. It stood up on 2 legs and turned to look at me when I realized it was not a bear, but a large, heavy-set animal with a black face and no snout, ape-like in appearance. It looked surprised but not scared of me. It backed away from me and disappeared up the slope rapidly and reappeared short about 150 feet up the slope. It looked down at me and called at me with a weird screech that made my hair stand up. It then quickly disappeared up the slope. I tried to go up a little farther, but the slope was very steep, and I couldn't figure out how it was able to move up the hill so quickly. Shortly afterwards, a bunch of bighorn sheep came stampeding down the slope from where the thing had gone. They looked terrified, but ran right past me in their haste. I decided to join them and made my way back, looking over my shoulder the whole way. I could have shot it, but I honestly didn't know what it was. I did not return to the area last fall because I am no longer comfortable hunting in that area. I haven't told anyone, but I found one of your posters in Kananaskis, and I thought that I should at least tell you guys about it. I'm an engineer in Calgary, so I do not want my customers to think that I am a kook, but I know what I saw, and it wasn't a bear or someone in a suit. It was a real animal, and I think it was a Sasquatch. Number 1. A log driver's waltz. When driving on the roads, it is important to pay attention so you can avoid objects that are thrown at your vehicle, whether it be garbage, rocks, or even giant logs being thrown at you by a cryptid, as this motorist learned in our next story. Driving north on the existing right-of-way. Off to the right and part way up the mountainside was a staging area for logs, pre-cut to length and stacked, awaiting pickup. The beginning of the slope uphill was approximately 100 feet from our truck. The logs were staged about 200 feet up the mountainside. Keeping in mind that as you look up the mountainside, the staged logs become further away from the truck, left of center. These logs weren't overly large in diameter, but I would estimate them at 8 to 12 inches. The vehicle was traveling at roughly 15 kilometers an hour. The weather was slightly overcast with a light mist of rain. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a log descending from the staging area to my right and being propelled towards us and the truck, passing through the air in front of us and landing off to the left, only feet from us as we passed by. The log appeared to be launched as opposed to falling off the stack. It would be impossible to fly through the air in the distance it did without some momentum behind it. At this point, I accelerated and removed myself as quickly as possible from the area. Not knowing if this is a hot spot for sightings or not, most likely this just becomes another story without verification. I cannot state that this would be a Sasquatch or Bigfoot incident, but I know of nothing else that could possibly throw a log and project it at my vehicle from that distance. The added elevation could make it possible for the log to travel that distance. I have made mention of this incident to other organizations in the past, but did not follow up with any requests. Today, I am retired to verify the elevations and distance of which I am referring. I should also mention that the log flew through the air like a spear. It did not tumble end over end. With that, another one of our journeys together is complete. The evil forces that run this dark dimension have asked that I remind you to like, comment, and subscribe, lest they be forced to send you alone into the woods with only hungry Sasquatches for company. Number 5. Bigfoot go wah! Our first sighting was made by a resident living just west of Pigeon Lake, who was fortunate enough to witness a pair of strange creatures near their home that were unlike anything they had ever seen or heard before. As they themselves put it, I was on an acreage and looked to the west near a tree line and a fence line about 75 yards from me. At first, I thought it was a man coming out of the trees. Then, I looked again, and this huge beast was turning around. I saw the side profile, then I saw his back as he swiftly went back into the trees. I would estimate 8 to 9 feet tall and several hundred pounds. It was cinnamon in color, and I noticed the muscles rippling on its shoulders. It was cinnamon in color, and I noticed the muscles rippling on his shoulders and back as it went back into the woods. It looked like it did not have a neck. I also thought I had noticed another one crouched down not far from the big one. About 15 minutes earlier to this, I was in another part of the yard and had heard a wah, wah, then a tree knock, but really didn't attribute these sounds to anything until I saw the Bigfoot 15 minutes later. Were these creatures members of the infamous Bigfoot family? And were the strange noises the witness heard earlier made by the creature? We may never know for sure. Number 4. A family sighting. Our next sighting comes from a man who was playing with his siblings when he was a child and saw the creature making its way through the woods. Considering what he saw, he relates a pretty chill story. As he put it, in 1980, our family lived in Morley, Alberta, close to the bridge and the school. We played all throughout that area on motorbikes, making forts in the woods and exploring near the banks of the Elbow River. My older brother was 14 years old, and my sister was about 18 years old. I was only 10 years old. I remember watching a tall, big figure traverse the foothill behind what is now the community school. What struck me at first was it was very large and moved very fast, though it was not running. The figure was dark against the pale straw-colored hill. I knew immediately that it was not human. It was upright and moved on 2 feet. I also remember it had a funny shaped head. In my 10-year-old mind, it was as if he had balanced a cap on the crown of his head instead of pulling it onto his head. It was moving away from us. My sister relates that he was grayish, had hair all over its body, had an oblong head, had no clothes on, and was bipedal and moving quickly. My brother remembers that it was very large, estimating over 8 feet, and again, the oblong head. I don't remember what day it was, or when it happened. It must have been either just approaching winter or coming into spring. The trees were bare. The bush on the hill he was moving on was scarce. We saw him clearly in the daylight. He was not trying to conceal himself in the trees that ran along the river. He did not stop. None of us remember feeling afraid, and all of us knew what it was. We didn't ever talk about it, but not because we were ashamed or scared. It was as if we had simply seen a moose or something. If you saw Bigfoot with your own 2 eyes, do you think you would manage to keep as calm as these kids did? I think it would depend on how close the creature was, and whether or not it looked hungry.
Number 3 on this list is that Bigfoot is actually a demon. For years, Bigfoot has been talked about as being a creature, a massive mystical ape that may have evolved from gorillas at some point to become what it is now. But this also seems a tad bit far-fetched based on how little sightings there are of it. How is it possible that a creature that's so big hasn't ever been confirmed? The only explanation that I can think of is that Bigfoot's actually a demon. If Bigfoot is actually a mythical demon creature from hell, then it makes sense why we don't have regular sightings of it. It can go between hell and earth whenever it feels like, and potentially has the capability to turn invisible if it wants. If it was a demon, then it would remind me a lot of some of the ancient Greek demon creatures from mythology. Hades' 3-headed dog, Cerberus, comes to mind as a potential comparison. Now, if Bigfoot was actually a demonic creature from hell, then it begs the question, what is it doing here? Well, we may never know that. Sometimes devilish creatures just come to Earth for the sake of coming to Earth. For instance, there's an area called the Devil's Tramping Grounds in North Carolina where it's believed that the devil comes often and dances there. It's possible that Bigfoot does something similar in the forests of North America. It's also possible, however, that Bigfoot is up to some demonic mission. Potentially it's tasked with having individuals go missing in the forest and bringing them back to hell. Or maybe it's just the keeper of these woods and haunts them like a ghost would a house. Whatever the case is, I actually much prefer the idea that Bigfoot is just a big ape that has evolved. The second that we start throwing in the idea of a demon, he gets way more dangerous in my opinion. Number 2 on this list is the Bigfoot curse. We've talked already in this video about how Bigfoot could have been an experiment done by the government or maybe just a product of evolution, but what if there's an actual curse that's going on here? Some of the First Nations who were around during the beginning of the Bigfoot legend believed that Bigfoot was actually a man that had been turned into this hunking hairy beast and had been given special powers and abilities. These powers and abilities though were at the cost of his human appearance, memories, and ability to communicate with our species in general. They worried that this curse could be passed on and that if you didn't respect the forest, that this curse may find you next. This curse legend also sort of started the association with Bigfoot and environmental care. For a while there, Bigfoot was portrayed as an evil creature lurking around the woods, ready to pounce on unsuspecting victims. But in the 80s, the narrative changed a little bit. Bigfoot could potentially be the guardian of the forest and someone who's here to remind us that we need to protect our environment. This urban legend takes that a step further and says that this creature was actually once a person. Maybe this person who was cursed to be Bigfoot didn't care enough about our forests, and now they're cursed to forever be this giant beast and to live in the woods alone. This would be to show someone what it's like to have this forest be your home. I like the idea behind this curse, I think all of us should be a little bit more environmentally conscious. However, it's kind of scary to think that I could turn into Bigfoot and live alone misunderstood in the woods for the rest of my life. Probably not the coolest existence, to be honest. Number 1 on this list is the Bigfoot omen. Seeing Bigfoot is something that only a handful of people have ever done in their lives. This is why, to this day, its existence hasn't been able to be confirmed. As cool as it would be to see this creature and know for sure that the stories are accurate, some say that it might be the worst omen of your life. Is it possible that all of the limited sightings of Bigfoot through the years haven't just been a coincidence, but they've actually been on purpose? What if Bigfoot chooses who it shows itself to? What if these encounters aren't just by chance, but it's actually an omen? This is what a lot of people believe in regards to this creature. The Ojibwe of the Northern Plains believed that seeing this beast was an omen of bad luck or a warning of incoming misfortune. This is especially scary for all those Bigfoot enthusiasts out there trying to find Bigfoot, because if you ever actually do see the beast, then it might be the last thing you ever do. Personally, I find this urban legend to be a tad bit hard to believe. Bigfoot is a legendary creature that's said to be magnificent and majestic. Seeing this thing out in the wild, assuming it doesn't attack you, would honestly be a life-changing event. I would have hoped that seeing it would have even brought you good luck. Fingers crossed that my version of events is the right one, and seeing this creature isn't an indicator of an unavoidable morbid future.
Number 5. Day trip gone wrong. When in the wilds of Alberta, people are often advised to be aware of the wildlife that might wander into your path and how to deal with it. It is not uncommon for people to see deer, bears, and even the occasional mountain lion. But one creature that they are not warned about in many of the pamphlets is Bigfoot. As this family found out, this is their story as related by their father. There was still some snow in the bush. We were picking dead tamarack and spruce deadfall to take home for making beanpole teepees in our garden. We had our 3 kids with us, aged around 3, 6, and 8 at the time. My wife and I were dragging the dry fall out of the bush and figuring which ones we could work with. After what seemed like a couple hours, we had a stack of about 25 poles, and we were eating lunch with the kids when things went absolutely crazy. At first we got screamed at big time. Then, stuff comes flying out of the bush at us, like rocks, tree limbs, and sod hunks. Sounded like things breaking in the bush and whacking sounds. It was f***ing nuts. Nothing hit any of us. We had been in that area many times prior in the years, and never had anything like this occur. Our 8-year-old jumped into the truck and locked all the doors, with the other 4 of us doing laps around the vehicle. I grabs our 3-year-old and gets her into the back seat through the window, and I'm trying to figure out who is screwing with us. It is funny now, not so much back then. Now this is weird. First, whoever or whatever was crawling on all 4s over all the downed timber and old logs, staring right at me as it moved back and forth. From what I could make out, and another 1 or 2 were behind it, also on all 4s, crawling around behind with the closer one that seemed way bigger, one that I could make out, although the bush. These ones were about 15 to 20 feet inside the tree line. We were parked in the ditch off the old lease road. About 30 to 40 feet further into the timber was another 2, or a couple person silhouette we could make out. They were moving through the trees, making animal crazy sounds, big deep volume. We were like, holy crap, no person could do that. No way anyone could belt it out like that. Not a chance. This went on for what seemed a good couple minutes. All of the kids began freaking out and crying inside the vehicle. My wife was standing with me when we were watching this go on, and then started telling me, "Let's get out of here." And I am trying to get a grip on the shit I am looking at through inside the trees. I don't think I was freaked out by what was happening. I could just not process what I was looking at. I still recall thinking, why are some people trying to scare the crap out of us out here? Number 4. Wycliffe Regional Park. Despite being posted on the Sasquatch Alberta website, our next tale actually takes place in British Columbia. However, it does feature a man who went out looking for a creature and claims to have come across the legendary cryptid as well as their young. In his own words, this happened near Wycliffe Regional Park, Perry Creek Road, Cranbrook, BC. I was out a few years ago looking for Sasquatches. I made noises to attract any creature and I got several responses. They kept getting closer and closer. Then I heard the footsteps, more vocalizations, closer and closer. Then I saw it. For only a second and a half, a large, upright creature with a smaller child creature brushed past my view and disappeared into the forest. I started chasing it, but could not keep up. Right where I saw it moments before, there were footprints 6 inches into the ground, and hair on trees where they were. I know this sighting is not in Alberta, but pretty close, so I just wanted to let you know about my experience. I did take photos, but they were lost when my old phone broke. I had been there 3 to 5 times before with friends, but we didn't find much evidence until the other time I reported about earlier today. I have not been back there because I am just shocked and kind of terrified of what I saw. I went out there just because I didn't know what was on the dirt road past the Wycliffe Regional Park, and I just wanted to know what I would find back there.
Number 3 on this list is the hide behind. The hide behind is a famous cryptid in American folklore that's been talked about for many years. It's a very deadly creature that, if encountered, could very easily take your life. Cryptid Wiki says the hide behind is a mysterious nocturnal creature from American folklore. It's said to prey upon humans that wander the woods at night and was credited for the disappearances of early colonial loggers when they failed to return to camp. Early accounts describe hide behinds as large, powerful animals, despite the fact that no one was able to see them. As its name suggests, the hide behind is noted for its ability to conceal itself. When an observer attempts to look directly at it, the creature hides again behind an object or the observer and therefore can't be seen directly. The hide behind uses this ability to stalk human prey without being observed and to attack without warning. Once the person is killed, the hide behind drags the person back to their lair to be eaten. Ever since people have been chopping down trees, this creature has been spoken about as being a menace. It is fast and very predatory, and considering you won't be able to really see it at all if it is stalking you, then having one decide that you're a tasty meal is pretty much a death sentence. That is, unless you happen to be in possession of some alcohol. Beer, wine, whiskey, other hard liquors. If you're a lumberjack who is alone in the woods, then bring some with you. Now, this isn't so that you can get blasted in the forest by yourself, although I'm sure that would be great fun in its own right. Having some alcohol on your person is actually a defense mechanism. If you feel that one of these creatures is stalking you, then drink the booze that you have. You may even want to take some of it and rub it on your body. This is because it's currently believed that the hide behind hates the smell of alcohol and won't consume anyone or anything that's had it or smells like it. To date, this is our only known way of saving yourself from being prey to this dangerous woodland creature. Number 2 on this list is a Brazilian wandering spider. Similar to our dart frog, this is assuredly a very real animal that scientists have studied extensively. As you can imagine, they are mainly native to Brazil and are extremely dangerous. World Atlas writes, the Brazilian wandering spider is the most venomous arachnid in the world. Even the scientific name of the spider, Phonutria, means murderous in Greek. The spiders are called wandering spiders, as during the night they prefer to crawl on the floor of the jungle looking for prey instead of building webs and staying in them. During the day, the spiders hide in various places, including the banana plant. The spiders might also wander into human settlements where they might remain hidden in houses and cars. If disturbed by humans, they may bite. The small size of these spiders makes them even more difficult to detect. Until 1996, when an antidote had been found, 14 people were reported to have died from the bites of the wandering spider. The venom of the spider causes extreme pain and inflammation, as well as loss of muscle control, which might lead to respiratory paralysis and death. What has this animal higher on the list than the poison dart frog is the fact that it's very very aggressive. The dart frog won't leap out at you and try to poison you. It may happen by accident, but it shouldn't want to harm you. This creature does just the opposite though, and it will go for the kill. It's also small enough that you might not notice it, but big enough that if it sees you and starts running towards you, then you might not have time to do anything to stop it. A terrifying animal that you really don't want to come face to face with. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Wendigo. I feel like everybody watching this video knew that this one would be coming, and that just speaks to the level of lore that surrounds this ancient creature. Cryptid Wiki says, the Wendigo is a cannibalistic spirit resembling a zombie. In some forms, the Wendigo is the size of a human, while in others it can be 15 feet tall. The earliest description of the Wendigo was that of a similar appearance to a corpse, with a skeleton-like thin body with gray skin, sunken eyes, bloody lips, yellow fangs, and a long, slimy tongue. Later myths say that the Wendigo is a lipless ape with giant fangs that devours human flesh. It can turn a person into a Wendigo, which was one of the worst curses to the Algonquin-speaking Native Americans of Canada. These beasts are highly dangerous, and encountering one is horribly unlucky. I was looking for some potential ways to fight back against these things, and happened to find an expert list a few on Quora. They say the first is fire. Not just a torch or a bonfire, it needs to be completely engulfed in fire for a prolonged period, long enough to breach the outer Wendigo and reach the human inside. The second requires getting even closer to the murderous beast and somehow stabbing it with something long and sharp directly where the heart should be. Once again, that is where the frozen human is supposedly dormant. Frankly, both of these options are highly dangerous, and even if you did hold up a flame, there's no saying for sure the Wendigo won't simply overpower you as you're doing it. However, these are your best shots at staying alive. Hopefully you never have to do this though, and can avoid an encounter altogether.